The classroom at Galactic Academy felt cold even with the heating system running. Jake Morrison sat in the back row and watched his alien classmates whisper among themselves. Their voices made strange sounds that the universal translator turned into worried words. The Advanced Survival Training course had students from 12 different worlds, and Jake was the only human in the group. Professor Zixtel walked into the room. The professor looked like a tall crystal statue that could move and talk. Ice crystals grew on his body and fell to the floor with each step. He came from Kepler 7, a frozen moon where the temperature never got warmer than what humans called freezing cold. The other students sat up straight when they saw him. Even the biggest aliens seemed small next to the professor. "Today we discuss your final test," Professor Zixtel said. His voice sounded like wind blowing through ice caves. "You will go to planet Tundra 9 during blizzard season. Each student must survive 3 days and 3 nights alone." Jake listened while his classmates started talking fast in their own languages. The universal translator could not keep up with all the worried voices at once. He recognized some of his classmates from other courses. There was Krex, a lizard-like saurian whose skin changed colors when he got nervous. Right now his scales were turning dark blue. Next to Krex sat the Valen twins Lyra and Nova. They looked like tall, thin people made of silver light. Their homeworld never had winter, and they had never seen snow before coming to the academy. The temperature on Tundra 9 drops to -40 degrees, the professor continued. Blizzards can last for days. The wind can knock down a grown Krix warrior. He pointed to Zach, one of the insect-like students. Zach's antenna drooped when he heard this. The professor moved to the front of the class and picked up a small backpack. Each student gets basic survival gear. 1 emergency food packet that lasts 3 days, 1 water purification tablet, 1 small folding shovel, 1 emergency blanket, 1 waterproof tarp. No heating devices. No communication equipment, no environmental suits. A student from the back raised a clawed hand. "Professor, what about thermal generators? My species cannot survive in cold without artificial heat." "No artificial heating, Professor Zixtel. Sod, this course tests your ability to survive with basic tools only. The Academy monitors your vital signs from orbit. If you are about to die, rescue teams will pick you up. But rescue means you fail the course." Jake thought about winters at his grandfather's cabin in Minnesota. Grandpa Joe had taught him how to read weather patterns and build shelters from whatever nature provided. "Son," his grandfather used to say, "humans survived ice ages before we had fancy tools. We learned to work with cold weather instead of fighting it." Krex raised his hand. "Professor, my thermal regulation suit can keep me warm for maybe 6 hours on full power. After that I will freeze." "Then you must find another way to stay warm," the professor replied, "or you fail." The Valen twins looked at each other with worry. Their species generated very little body heat. They usually lived in climate-controlled environments. Nova spoke in a voice like musical notes. "Our people have never experienced temperatures below 20 degrees. We do not know how to survive in extreme cold." "That is why you take this course," Professor Zixtel said. "To learn survival skills you do not have." Jake looked around the classroom. Every alien student seemed scared. They talked about their advanced technology and how it might not work in the extreme conditions. The Krix buzzed nervously about their hard shells not providing enough insulation. The Drachnary students worried about their reptilian blood slowing down in cold weather. Even the furry Ursoids from high-gravity worlds seemed concerned about the wind and snow, but Jake felt calm. He had spent weeks camping in winter conditions much worse than -40 degrees. He knew how to find shelter, how to stay dry, and how to keep warm without any technology. His classmates had grown up on worlds with perfect climates or had always used machines to control their environment. They had never learned to survive with just their hands and basic tools. "The transport ships leave tomorrow morning," Professor Zixtel announced. "You will be dropped at random locations across the continent. The closest students will be at least 10 kilometers apart. No one can help you. No one can share supplies. You succeed or fail based on your own skills. After class, Jake walked back to his dormitory room. In the hallway, he passed groups of alien students planning their survival strategies. Most of them talked about rationing their food or finding ways to make their technology last longer. Some discussed building small shelters from the tarp and waiting for rescue. Jake's roommate Chin was from Earth too, but he studied engineering instead of survival courses. "Are you worried about tomorrow?" Chan asked. "Not really," Jake said. He pulled out his small backpack and checked the gear one more time. The folding shovel was lightweight but strong. The emergency blanket would reflect body heat. The tarp was waterproof and could be used many different ways. "This gear is actually pretty good for winter survival." "But minus 40 degrees, Chun said, "and blizzards that last for days." The other students have been talking about nothing else. "They think some people might not make it." Jake nodded. "They might be right. But not because the planet is too dangerous. Because they do not know how to use what they have." He thought about his grandfather's lessons again. "Cold weather is not your enemy if you understand it. Snow can kill you or keep you alive. It depends on what you know." The next morning came quickly. Jake ate a good breakfast and reported to the transport bay. His alien classmates looked tired as if they had not slept. Many carried extra supplies that the professors made them leave behind. Only basic gear was allowed as the transport ship left orbit. Jake looked out the window at planet Tundra 9. It looked like a white ball covered in swirling clouds. Somewhere down there in that frozen wilderness, he would prove that sometimes old knowledge worked better than new technology. The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Tundra 9. Jake pressed his face against the small window and watched white clouds rush past. Below the clouds, he could see endless frozen plains stretching to the horizon. The landscape looked like Earth's Antarctica, but bigger and more hostile. "First drop zone approaching," the ship's computer announced. Jake watched as the cargo bay doors opened. Cold air rushed in and made everyone shiver. The first student to jump was Krex, the nervous saurian. His thermal suit was already activated and glowing bright orange. He disappeared into the swirling snow below. One by one, the alien students made their jumps. The Valen twins went together, holding hands until they activated their individual parachutes. Zack the Crix buzzed loudly as he fell, his hard shell gleaming in the dim light. Each student landed in a different location across the vast frozen continent. "Human student Morrison, prepare for drop," the computer said. Jake checked his parachute one last time and walked to the edge of the cargo bay. Wind howled up from below and snow hit his face like tiny ice needles. The temperature display showed minus 35 degrees and dropping. He could see his breath forming ice crystals in the air. "Good luck," said the ship's captain, a friendly Centaurian with 4 arms. "The Academy monitors show you landing on Ridge 7. It is high ground but very exposed to wind." Jake nodded and jumped. The parachute opened with a sharp crack and suddenly he was floating down through thick snow clouds. The wind pushed him sideways as he fell. He could not see the ground until the last few seconds before landing. His boots hit hard-packed snow and he rolled to absorb the impact. The parachute caught the wind and tried to drag him across the frozen ground. Jake quickly cut the lines and bundled up the fabric. The parachute material might be useful later. The blizzard was getting stronger. Wind howled across the ridge and snow flew horizontally through the air. Jake could barely see 20 feet in any direction. The cold bit through his winter clothes and made his face sting. He pulled up his hood and looked around for shelter. The ridge was mostly bare rock with patches of deep snow. Wind had carved strange shapes in the ice and snowdrifts. Jake walked carefully along the ridgeline, testing each step. One wrong move could send him falling into a hidden crevice or snow pit. Through his radio headset, he could hear emergency calls from other students. The academy monitored all vital signs, but students could request emergency pickup if they were dying. Already 3 students had activated their rescue beacons. "This is Vex from Drop Zone 4, came a panicked message. "My heating unit failed. Core temperature dropping fast. Request immediate extraction." "Rescue ship dispatched to your location," the academy responded. Maintain your position and conserve body heat. Jake turned off his radio. Listening to the panic would not help him survive. He needed to focus on finding shelter before the storm got worse. The temperature was still dropping and night would come in a few hours. He found a large snowdrift on the protected side of some rocks. The snow looked deep and well packed by the wind. Jake pulled out his small folding shovel and began to dig. His alien classmates would think he was crazy for digging in the snow during a blizzard. But Jake knew that snow could be the best insulation if you used it right. The shovel bit into the snow easily. This was good snow for building, not too hard, and not too soft. Jake dug an entrance tunnel that sloped down into the drift, then up again into the main chamber. Cold air was heavy and would sink into the entrance tunnel while warm air would rise and stay in the chamber as he worked. Jake thought about his classmates scattered across the frozen continent. Cracks had probably burned through his thermal suits. Power supply already. The Saurians were desert creatures who had never experienced real cold. His body would shut down quickly without artificial heat. The Valen twins Lyra and Nova were probably huddled together under their emergency tarp. But the tarp would act like a sail in this wind. They might have been blown off their feet or had their shelter destroyed. Their species generated almost no body heat, and they had no fat reserves to burn for warmth. ZZAK, the Crix was probably trying to dig into the snow with his claws. The insect-like aliens were strong, but they did not understand that digging randomly would not create proper shelter. They needed to understand how snow insulation worked. Jake finished his entrance tunnel and started hollowing out the main chamber. He made it dome-shaped so the curved walls would be stronger and would not collapse. The chamber was just big enough for him to lie down with a little extra space for his gear. Snow from his digging piled up outside the entrance. Jake used this loose snow to build walls around the tunnel opening. This would block the wind and create a buffer zone. He left a small hole at the top for ventilation. Without fresh air, he could suffocate or get carbon monoxide poisoning from his own breath. By the time he finished digging, Jake was sweating despite the cold. Physical work generated body heat, and his winter clothes trapped that heat close to his skin. He crawled into his snow cave and sealed the entrance with loose snow, leaving just the ventilation hole open. Inside the shelter, the temperature was already warmer. Snow was an excellent insulator because it trapped air between the ice crystals. The walls of his snow cave would actually get warmer as his body heat raised the inside temperature. Jake had built similar shelters many times. During winter camping trips with his grandfather, he pulled out his emergency food packet and ate half of it slowly. The food would give his body fuel to generate heat through the night. He spread his emergency blanket on the floor of the cave and wrapped himself in his extra clothes. Outside, the wind howled, and snow pounded against his shelter. But inside, Jake was comfortable and warm. The temperature in the cave stabilized at about 28 degrees. His breath no longer formed ice crystals through the thin snow walls. He could hear his radio crackling with more emergency calls. 6 students had already been rescued. Others were reporting equipment failures and hypothermia symptoms. Some had stopped responding to radio calls entirely. Jake turned off the radio and settled in for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now he was safe. His shelter would protect him from the wind and cold. His body heat would keep the cave warm. And unlike his classmates who were fighting against the environment, Jake was working with it. The blizzard raged on outside, but Jake slept peacefully in his snow cave, warm and dry, while his alien classmates struggled to survive their first night on the frozen planet. Jake woke up to the sound of wind still howling outside his snow shelter. He checked his watch and saw that he had slept for 8 hours. His body felt rested and warm. The temperature inside his snow cave had stayed comfortable all night while outside the blizzard continued to rage. He ate the rest of his first day's food ration and melted some clean snow in his metal cup to make drinking water. The snow cave was working perfectly. His breath no longer made ice crystals and his fingers were not numb from cold. Jake had survived his first night in conditions that were killing his alien classmates. Through the ventilation hole he could see that daylight was coming, but the storm showed no signs of stopping. Jake decided to improve his shelter while he waited for better weather. He crawled outside and gathered more snow to strengthen the walls. The loose snow from his digging had blown away during the night, so he dug up fresh material. Working in the blizzard was dangerous, but Jake moved carefully and never went far from his shelter entrance. The wind tried to knock him down, and the blowing snow made it hard to see. But 15 minutes of work could make his shelter much stronger and warmer. As he worked, Jake heard a weak voice calling through the storm. Someone was close by and in trouble. He stopped digging and listened carefully. The voice came again, barely audible over the howling wind. Help, cannot feel my hands, Jake followed the voice and found Zach the Crick student about 50 meters away. The insect-like alien was lying in a shallow hole he had tried to dig with his claws. His hard shell was covered with ice and his antennae were not moving. Zach's eyes were dull and unfocused, signs of severe hypothermia. Zach, can you hear me? Jake shouted over the wind. The alien's eyes focused on Jake with difficulty. Morrison, human student. Thought you were dead. Found your digging yesterday, made no sense. Jake looked at Zach's attempted shelter. The Cricks had dug straight down into the snow, creating a pit that filled with cold air and provided no protection from the wind. His approach made sense. For a creature that naturally burrowed underground, but snow was not like dirt or sand. Your shelter is wrong, Jake said. Cold air sinks into holes. You need to build up, not dig down. Cannot move. Too cold. Zach's voice was getting weaker. Jake made a quick decision. He could not move Zach to his own shelter because the Cricks was too big and heavy, but he could build a proper snow shelter right here. It would take time and energy, but Jake could not let his classmate freeze to death. Stay still and conserve your heat, Jake told Zach. I am going to build you a real shelter. Jake worked faster than he had ever worked before. He used his shovel and his hands to build walls around Zach's position. Instead of digging down, he built up using the wind-packed snow. The walls formed a semicircle that blocked the wind from 3 directions. Then Jake showed Zach how to help despite his weakened condition. Use your claws to scrape loose snow toward me. I will pack it into the walls. We need to make this space smaller so your body heat can warm it. Working together, they built a proper windbreak shelter. Jake covered the top with his emergency tarp, weighing it down with snow blocks. The result was not as good as his snow cave, but it would keep Zach from freezing. How did you know to do this? Zach asked. His voice was stronger now that he was protected from the wind. My people evolved on a planet with ice ages, Jake explained. We learned to survive in cold weather, or we died. Snow can kill you if you fight it, but if you understand how it works, it can save your life. Jake left Zach with half of his remaining food and promised to check on him again. The Cricks was still in danger, but at least he had a chance now. Jake made his way back to his own shelter through the continuing blizzard. Inside his snow cave, Jake activated his emergency radio to report Zach's condition to the academy. This is Morrison, found student Zach in severe hypothermia. Built emergency. Shelter at coordinates ... He gave the location and vital sign readings from his basic medical scanner. Acknowledged Morrison, came the reply. Rescue team is standing by. Do you require extraction? Negative. Zach needs help, but he is stable for now. I am warm and safe. There was a pause. Morrison, your vital signs show you are in excellent condition. How are you maintaining body temperature? Jake looked around his cozy snow cave. I built a proper shelter from snow. It provides insulation and wind protection. You built a shelter from frozen water? The academy controller sounded confused. Our records show snow as a hazard, not construction material. It can be both, Jake said. Depends on how you use it. The radio crackled with reports from other students. More had been rescued during the night. Others were barely hanging on, burning through their emergency supplies and waiting for the storm to end. None of them understood that the snow itself could provide the shelter they needed. Jake spent the rest of the morning improving his cave and checking on Zach every few hours, The Crix was slowly recovering in his windbreak shelter. His body temperature was rising and he could move his claws again. "Your species is remarkable," Zack said during one visit. "You see solutions where we see only problems. The Academy should study human survival methods." "Maybe they will after this," Jake replied. "But first we all need to survive the next 2 days." As the second day wore on, the storm finally began to weaken. The wind was still strong, but the snow was not falling as heavily. Jake could see farther across the frozen landscape. In the distance, he spotted the emergency shelter of another student, probably one of the Valen twins. The shelter was a standard emergency tarp stretched between ice formations, but it was flapping wildly in the wind and would not provide much protection. Jake decided to investigate. If his classmates were in trouble, maybe he could help them too. The trek across the snow was difficult but not dangerous now that the worst of the storm was passing. Jake followed a route that stayed on high ground and avoided areas where the snow looked soft or unstable. He found Nova, one of the Valen twins, huddled alone under the damaged emergency tarp. She was conscious but shivering uncontrollably. Her silver skin had turned pale blue and her light-based body was barely glowing. "Where is your sister?" Jake asked. "Lyra. Activated emergency beacon. Rescued this morning." Nova's voice was weak, but she could still talk. Jake looked at Nova's situation. The tarp shelter was useless in these conditions. She had no protection from the wind and her body generated almost no heat. But she was still alive, which meant she was tough enough to survive if he could help her build proper shelter. "I am going to teach you how to build a snow shelter," Jake said. "It will save your life." Nova stared at Jake as if he had lost his mind. "Build shelter from snow? That makes no sense. Snow is cold. Cold things cannot make warmth." Jake knelt beside the shivering Valen and spoke calmly. "Your people never had winter on your homeworld. You do not understand how snow works, but I can teach you." He showed Nova how to test the snow with her hands. "Feel this. The snow has air trapped inside. Air is insulation. When you build walls from snow, the air keeps cold out and warmth in." Nova touched the snow carefully. Her species had sensitive skin that could detect temperature changes better than most aliens. "The snow does feel different than I expected." "Not solid like ice?" "Exactly," Jake said. "Ice is solid and conducts cold. Snow is full of air pockets and blocks cold. We can use it to build walls that protect you from wind and trap your body heat." Working together, they built a simple lean-to shelter against a large ice formation. Jake showed Nova how to pack the snow blocks tightly to eliminate gaps where wind could enter. The Valen learned quickly once she understood the basic principles. "My body produces very little heat," Nova said as they worked. "Will this shelter warm enough for my species?" "We will make it smaller so less heat is needed," Jake replied. "And I will show you exercises to generate more body heat through muscle movement." They finished the shelter just as the second night began to fall. The storm was weakening, but temperatures were dropping even lower. Jake's instruments showed -42 degrees outside. Inside Nova's new snow shelter, the temperature was already 10 degrees warmer. Jake taught Nova breathing exercises and muscle movements that would help her generate heat. The Valen's light-based physiology was different from human biology, but the basic principles worked. Moving muscles generated energy that became heat. "I must return to my own shelter now," Jake said. "But you should survive the night in here. Tomorrow I will check on you and we can improve this shelter." "Wait," Nova called as Jake prepared to leave. "Why are you helping us? This is a competition. You could win easily by letting the other students fail." Jake paused at the shelter entrance. "My grandfather taught me that survival is not about competing with nature. It is about working together to overcome challenges. Helping you helps me understand these conditions better." The trek back to his own snow cave was more difficult in the dark. Jake had to move slowly and test each step. Falling into a hidden crevice or snow pit could be fatal. But he made it safely to his shelter and crawled inside. His snow cave was perfectly warm and comfortable. The walls had actually gotten stronger during the day as moisture from his breath had frozen into the snow structure. Jake ate his second day's food ration and settled in for another good night's sleep. Through his radio, he monitored Academy communications. More students had been rescued as the storm weakened. Of the original 24 students, only 8 were still on the planet. Most of the survivors were in bad condition and requesting emergency pickup. "This is Academy Control calling Morrison," came a voice over the radio. "Your vital signs remain stable. Report your condition." "I am warm and safe in my shelter," Jake replied. "Food and water supplies are adequate. No medical issues." "Morrison, our monitors show you have been moving around during the storm. Explain your activities." Jake hesitated. He was not supposed to help other students during the survival test, but he could not let his classmates freeze to death. "I located 2 other students in distress. Provided basic survival instruction." Only there was a long pause. "Morrison, you are not authorized to assist other students. This could result in test failure for all parties involved." "Understood," Jake said. But he knew he would keep helping if he found more students in danger. The third day dawned clear and cold. The blizzard had finally ended, but the temperature was still deadly. Jake emerged from his shelter to find a landscape transformed by the storm. Snowdrifts were piled 20 feet high in some places. Ice formations gleamed like crystal sculptures in the morning sun. Jake checked on his classmates. Zach was doing well in his windbreak shelter. The Cricks had learned to pack snow around the walls during the night, improving the insulation. Nova was alive but weak in her lean-to shelter. She needed more help to survive another night. "I am going to teach you to build a proper snow cave," Jake told Nova. "Like the one that kept me warm through the worst of the storm." They worked together to dig a new shelter in a large snowdrift. Jake showed Nova how to shape the entrance tunnel and main chamber for maximum warmth. The Valen was a quick learner, and soon understood the engineering principles involved. "Your species has remarkable knowledge," Nova said as they worked. "The Academy teaches us to survive with technology, but you survive by understanding the environment itself. Humans had to learn these skills over thousands of generations," Jake explained. "Our planet had ice ages that lasted for centuries. Only the humans who could work with cold weather survived to have children." By afternoon, they had completed Nova's snow cave. The shelter was warm enough that she could remove her outer clothing layers. Her natural bioluminescence was returning. As her body temperature stabilized, Jake spent the rest of the day helping Zach improve his shelter. The Crix was fascinated by human survival techniques and asked many questions about snow construction and heat conservation. "Will you teach these methods at the Academy?" Zach asked. "Other students should learn what you know. If I pass the test," Jake said, "but first we all need to survive tonight." As the third night approached, Jake felt confident about his own survival. His shelter was perfect and his supplies were holding out well, but he worried about his alien classmates. Even with his help, they were still struggling against an environment their species had never encountered. The Academy radio crackled with updates. Only 6 students remained on the planet. 3 more had been rescued during the day when their shelters failed or their medical conditions became critical. Jake, Nova, and Zach were 3 of the survivors. The other 3 were scattered across the continent, and Jake had no contact with them. He hoped they had found adequate shelter, but the vital sign monitors suggested they were all in poor condition. "Attention all remaining students," came the Academy announcement. "Final day of testing begins at sunrise. Pickup will occur at 1800 hours tomorrow, regardless of your condition. Prepare for extraction." Jake smiled as he settled into his snow cave for the 3rd night. He had not just survived the test. He had learned new things about cold weather survival and helped save the lives of 2 classmates. Tomorrow would bring rescue and return to the Academy, but tonight he was content to rest in his warm shelter while the stars shone bright in the clear cold sky above the frozen planet. The final morning on Tundra 9 was clear and calm. Jake emerged from his snow cave feeling rested and ready for rescue. The blizzard had left behind a beautiful but deadly landscape of ice and snow. Sunlight reflected off the white surface and made everything sparkle like diamonds. Jake packed his gear carefully and prepared to help his classmates get ready for pickup. The Academy transport ships would arrive in 12 hours. Until then, he wanted to make sure Nova and Zach were in good condition for the journey home. He found Nova sitting outside her snow cave, practicing the breathing exercises he had taught her. The Valen's silver skin was glowing with healthy bioluminescence. She looked tired but alert. "How do you feel?" Jake asked. "Better than I expected," Nova replied. "This shelter you taught me to build kept me warm all night. My sister Lyra will not believe that I survived 3 days in the snow." "You did more than survive," Jake said. "You learned new skills. That is what this test was really about." They walked together to check on Zach. The Crix was awake and moving around his improved shelter. His shell had regained its natural shine, and his antennae were active and alert. "Morrison the human," Zach buzzed in greeting. "I owe you my life. Without your teaching, I would have frozen in my hole in the snow." "You would have figured it out eventually," Jake said. "Your species is smart. You just needed to understand how snow works." Zach clicked his claws thoughtfully. "The Academy teaches us to overcome environments with technology, but you showed us how to work with the environment using knowledge. This is a different kind of intelligence." The 3 survivors spent the morning sharing their experiences and waiting for rescue. Jake taught them more about reading weather patterns and understanding snow conditions. Nova and Zach were eager to learn everything they could about human survival methods. "Will you write a report about these techniques?" Nova asked. "Other students should know about snow shelter construction before they take survival courses. The Academy might not believe that these simple methods work better than advanced technology," Jake said. "But I will try to teach anyone who wants to learn." At noon, the Academy transport ships appeared in the sky. 3 vessels landed at different locations to pick up the surviving students. Jake watched as rescue teams checked Nova and Zach before clearing them for transport. "Both students show excellent vital signs," the medic reported. "No signs of hypothermia or frostbite. Remarkable condition for students who survived the worst blizzard in Academy records." Jake boarded his transport with mixed feelings. He was glad to be going home, but he had enjoyed the challenge of surviving on Tundra 9. The 3 days had taught him that his grandfather's lessons were valuable, even on alien worlds with conditions worse than anything on Earth. The flight back to the Academy took 6 hours. During the journey, Jake learned what had happened to his other classmates. 18 students had been rescued early when their equipment failed or they developed severe hypothermia. 3 more had been picked up on the final day in poor but stable condition. Only Jake, Nova, and Zach had completed the full test in good health. More importantly, they had learned to survive using basic techniques instead of relying on technology that could fail. Back at the Academy, Professor Zixtal debriefed each surviving student individually. When Jake entered the professor's office, the crystalline being studied him with obvious interest. "Student Morrison, your performance was exceptional," Professor Zixtal said. "Your vital signs remained stable throughout the test. You showed no signs of stress or equipment failure. Explain your methods." Jake described his snow cave construction and heat conservation techniques. He showed the professor sketches of shelter designs and explained the physics of snow insulation. Professor Zixtal listened carefully and asked many detailed questions. "These techniques require no advanced technology," the professor observed, "only knowledge and physical effort. Why did the other students not use similar methods?" "Their species never evolved in cold climates," Jake explained. "They do not understand how snow and ice behave, but they can learn if someone teaches them." Professor Zixtal made notes in his electronic files. "Morrison, you not only survived the test, but assisted other students without compromising their learning. This shows leadership qualities as well as survival skills." "I could not let them freeze to death," Jake said. "Survival is about helping each other, not competing." The professor was quiet for a long moment. The Academy has focused on technological solutions to survival challenges, but your performance suggests that biological and cultural adaptations may be equally valuable. Would you consider teaching these methods to other students? Jake was surprised by the offer. You want me to become an instructor? The Academy Survival Program needs instructors who understand primitive techniques, Professor Zixtel said. Many planets have conditions where advanced technology fails. Students need backup skills that do not depend on equipment. Jake thought about his grandfather's lessons and the skills passed down through generations of humans. I would be honored to teach what I know, but I am still a student myself. I have much more to learn. That is why you would make a good teacher, the professor said. You understand that learning never ends. News of Jake's performance spread quickly through the academy. Students from other courses wanted to know how a human had survived conditions that defeated aliens with superior technology. Jake found himself giving informal lessons about snow shelter construction and cold weather survival. The Galactic Academy officially added primitive survival techniques to the advanced course curriculum. Jake became the youngest assistant instructor in Academy history. He taught students from dozens of different worlds how to survive using knowledge instead of technology. Nova and Zach became his first official students. The Valen and Crick spread word about human survival methods to their homeworlds. Soon, Jake was receiving requests to teach courses on planets throughout the galaxy. Your species has given us a great gift, Nova told Jake after his first official class. You have shown us that intelligence is not just about building better machines. Sometimes the best solutions are the oldest ones. Jake thought about his grandfather and the winter skills passed down through human generations. Those lessons had seemed simple when he learned them as a boy. But here among the stars, surrounded by aliens with technology beyond human understanding, those simple skills had proven their worth. The survival test on Tundra 9 had been designed to push students to their limits using basic equipment. Most alien students had seen it as a test to endure until rescue came. But Jake had understood the real lesson. Sometimes the most advanced solution was to work with nature instead of fighting it. As he prepared for his next teaching assignment, Jake smiled and remembered his grandfather's words. Son, humans survived ice ages before we had fancy tools. We learned to work with cold weather instead of fighting it. Those words had kept him warm through the blizzard on an alien world, and now they would help other species learn to survive in conditions their technology could not overcome. The galaxy was full of hostile environments and dangerous worlds. But with knowledge, patience, and respect for natural forces, any intelligent being could learn to survive and thrive among the stars.